My name is Sarah Chen, and the last words my father said to me before I walked out of his house forever were, "Your dreams are stupid and you'll come crawling back when reality hits you." He never lived to see TechNova go public at a valuation of $2.8 billion. He never saw Forbes put my face on their cover with the headline, "The Dropout Who Disrupted Everything." But maybe that's for the best, because his approval was never what drove me anyway. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, where corn stretched to the horizon and the biggest excitement was the annual county fair. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Our house sat on Maple Street, a modest ranch-style home with vinyl siding that had seen better days and a front yard that Dad kept pristine, because what will the neighbors think? My father, Robert Chen, immigrated from Taiwan when he was 12, and he carried the weight of that journey like a badge of honor and a chain around his neck. Dad worked as an accountant for the same firm for 32 years. Every morning at exactly 6:15, he would emerge from his bedroom wearing the same style of pressed khaki pants and button-down shirt, carrying his worn leather briefcase that Mom had given him for their 5th anniversary. He believed in stability above all else, in the security of a steady paycheck and the respectability of what he called professional work. Risk was the enemy. Uncertainty was failure waiting to happen. My mother, Linda, taught elementary school and shared Dad's reverence for conventional success. She spoke in gentle tones, but her words carried the weight of granite when it came to expectations. Good grades, proper behavior, safe choices. These were the pillars upon which their vision of my future rested. They had sacrificed everything to give me opportunities they never had, and they expected me to honor that sacrifice by choosing the most secure path possible. My older brother Michael was their golden child, though he wore that crown reluctantly. He followed their blueprint perfectly. Excellent grades, acceptance to state university, degree in engineering, job at a respected company, marriage to a nice girl from a good family, house in the suburbs. At family gatherings, Dad would beam with pride when introducing Michael to relatives and friends. "My son the engineer," he would say, his chest puffing out slightly. "Steady work, good benefits, retirement plan. That's how you build a life." I was supposed to be the next success story, the daughter who would make them equally proud by choosing medicine or law or perhaps following Mom into education. But from the time I was old enough to understand what money meant, I was fascinated by something entirely different. I wanted to know how things worked, not just technically, but economically. Why did some companies succeed while others failed? What made people buy one product over another? How did you create something from nothing and turn it into something valuable? When I was 8 years old, I started my first business selling friendship bracelets to my classmates. I had discovered that if I bought embroidery thread in bulk from the craft store, I could make bracelets for about 50 cents each and sell them for $3. The markup was incredible, and demand was strong among the girls in my grade. Within 2 weeks, I had made $47, which seemed like a fortune to my 8-year-old mind. I remember rushing home with my shoebox full of crumpled bills and coins, bursting into the kitchen where Mom was preparing dinner. "Look what I made," I announced, dumping the money onto the counter. Instead of the praise I expected, I was met with concern. Mom counted the money with a furrowed brow, while Dad examined one of my bracelets with the same skeptical expression he wore when reviewing tax returns. "Sarah, where did you get all this money?" Mom asked, and I could hear the worry in her voice. When I explained my business model with all the enthusiasm an 8-year-old could muster, their expressions grew more troubled rather than impressed. "Honey," Dad said slowly, "this isn't really appropriate. You're making your friends pay too much for something that probably costs you almost nothing to make. That's not fair to them." I tried to explain that my friends were happy to pay because they loved the bracelets and couldn't make them as well themselves, but Dad was already shaking his head. "This kind of thinking will get you in trouble, Sarah. You need to focus on your schoolwork and let adults worry about money." They made me give back most of the money to my customers and banned me from selling anything else at school. That was my first lesson in how differently my family and I viewed the world. To them, my instinct to create value and capture profit was somehow unseemly, even dishonest. To me, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I had identified a need, created a solution, and been rewarded for it. The fact that everyone involved was happy with the transaction seemed irrelevant to their moral calculations. Throughout elementary school, I continued to find ways to turn ideas into income, though I learned to be more discreet about it. I tutored younger kids in math for allowance money, sold my drawings at the school art fair, and organized neighborhood kids to do yard work for elderly residents. Each venture taught me something new about customer service, pricing, marketing, or operations. I was learning business fundamentals without even realizing it. My parents viewed these activities with increasing frustration. They saw them as distractions from academic achievement, evidence that I was developing the wrong priorities. Sarah is very bright, I overheard Mom telling Dad one evening, but she's too focused on these silly money-making schemes. I'm worried she's not taking her education seriously enough. The irony was that I was taking my education very seriously, just not in the way they expected. While they wanted me to memorize facts and regurgitate them on tests, I was more interested in understanding systems and solving real problems. My grades were good enough to keep them satisfied, but my heart was elsewhere. In middle school, I discovered the computer lab and instantly fell in love with technology. This was the late 90s, when the internet was still relatively new and exciting. I spent every free moment I could in that lab, learning HTML, exploring websites, and trying to understand how this digital world worked. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, noticed my interest and started staying after school to teach me more advanced skills. "You have a real aptitude for this, Sarah," she told me one afternoon as I was building my first website. "Have you thought about studying computer science in college?" The suggestion planted a seed that would grow into something much larger. Technology wasn't just interesting to me, it was powerful. It could reach people anywhere, solve problems at scale, and create entirely new ways of doing business. I started building websites for local businesses, charging modest fees that seemed enormous to my 13-year-old perspective. The flower shop downtown needed an online presence. The insurance agent wanted a way to showcase his services. The restaurant owner wanted customers to be able to view his menu online. These weren't sophisticated projects, but they were real businesses with real needs, and I was providing real solutions. Dad discovered my web design business when Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop called our house to thank him for raising such a helpful daughter. "Your Sarah built us a beautiful website," she gushed. "Our phone has been ringing off the hook with new customers who found us online. She's a smart little businesswoman." I expected him to be proud, but instead he was mortified. That evening, he sat me down for what he called a serious conversation. "Sarah, I'm concerned about this website business. You're 13 years old, you should be focusing on your studies, not trying to run a company. What if something goes wrong? What if you make a mistake that hurts someone's business? You could get us into legal trouble." His fear was palpable, and I realized that where I saw opportunity, he saw danger. Where I felt energized by the possibility of creating something valuable, he felt anxious about all the ways it could go wrong. "I want you to stop this immediately," he concluded. "Tell these business owners that you can't help them anymore. You need to focus on school." I complied, but reluctantly. Calling my clients to cancel their projects was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Each conversation felt like closing a door on my future self. But I was 13 and living in my parents' house, so their rules were law. High school brought new challenges and new opportunities to clash with my parents' vision for my life. I was a strong student academically, maintaining a GPA that put me in the top 10% of my class. I took advanced placement courses in math and science, participated in debate club, and earned recognition for various academic achievements. On paper, I was the model student my parents wanted me to be. Behind the scenes, however, I was nurturing my entrepreneurial instincts in whatever ways I could. I couldn't start another official business, but I found creative outlets for my interests. I wrote for the school newspaper, focusing on articles about student businesses and economic trends. I started an investment club, where students could pool their allowance money to buy shares of stock and learn about markets. I organized fundraising campaigns for various school activities, always looking for innovative ways to maximize revenue. My economics teacher, Mr. Davidson, recognized something in me that my parents couldn't see. He was a former business owner who had returned to teaching after selling his company, and he understood the entrepreneurial mindset. Sarah, he told me after I had presented a particularly detailed analysis of market trends in the technology sector, you think like an entrepreneur. Have you considered studying business in college? The suggestion was both thrilling and terrifying. Business school meant openly declaring my intentions to pursue the path my parents most feared. It meant rejecting their dreams of medical school or law school in favor of something they viewed as inherently risky and potentially disreputable. But it also meant the possibility of finally aligning my education with my passions. I started researching business programs at various universities, carefully hiding my browser history and clearing my search cache. I read about successful entrepreneurs, studied case studies of companies that had grown from garage startups to global enterprises, and dreamed about what I might be able to build someday. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that this was my calling. Junior year brought the inevitable conversations about college planning. My parents had already decided that I would major in pre-med or pre-law, preferably at a prestigious university that would impress their friends and colleagues. They spoke about my future with the same certainty they used when discussing the weather forecast, as if my preferences were irrelevant to the equation. Sarah has always been so good at science, Mom would tell relatives. We're thinking Johns Hopkins, or maybe Northwestern for pre-med. She'll make an excellent doctor. Dad would nod approvingly, adding medicine is stable work. People always need doctors. It's a respectable profession with good income potential. The irony of him praising medicine for its income potential, while criticizing my business interests for being focused on money, was not lost on me, but pointing out such contradictions had never proven productive in our household. Instead, I smiled and nodded while privately researching schools with strong entrepreneurship programs. The guidance counselor at our school, Mrs. Rodriguez, was more open to exploring different possibilities. During our college planning meetings, she asked thoughtful questions about my interests and goals, rather than simply assuming what I should study.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You've shown real leadership in organizing school events and fundraisers, she observed. Have you thought about business school? When I admitted that I had been considering it, her face lit up with enthusiasm. There are some excellent programs that focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. Schools like Babson College, University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, Stanford. These programs could be perfect for someone with your interests and abilities. She helped me research schools and requirements, providing guidance that my parents were unwilling or unable to offer. Through her, I learned about application deadlines, essay requirements, and scholarship opportunities. I discovered that the business world was far more sophisticated and intellectually rigorous than my parents seemed to believe. The real tension began when college applications opened senior year. My parents had compiled a list of schools they wanted me to apply to, all of which offered strong pre-professional programs in medicine or law. I had compiled my own secret list of schools with top-ranked business programs. The two lists had no overlap. For months I lived a double life. During family discussions, I dutifully researched the schools on their list, nodding along as they explained why each would be perfect for my future career in medicine. Meanwhile, I was secretly working on applications to business schools, writing essays about my entrepreneurial vision and my dreams of starting companies that could make a real difference in the world. The essays were the hardest part, not because I didn't know what to write, but because putting my dreams into words made them feel more real and therefore more vulnerable to criticism. I wrote about the friendship bracelet business and how it taught me the basics of profit and loss. I described building websites for local businesses and learning to identify market need. I outlined my vision for using technology to solve problems and create value in ways that hadn't been possible before. Writing those essays felt like finally being honest about who I was and what I wanted. For years I had been performing the role of the dutiful daughter while hiding my true ambitions. The application process forced me to articulate those ambitions clearly, and in doing so it made me realize how much I had been suppressing. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me submit applications to 5 business schools, including Wharton and Stanford.
She also helped me apply for financial aid and scholarships, since I knew my parents wouldn't support my choice financially if they disagreed with it academically. The whole process required careful coordination and timing to ensure my parents didn't discover what I was doing. The secret nearly came out in February when a representative from Stanford called our house to schedule an alumni interview. I happened to answer the phone and I quickly arranged to meet the interviewer at a coffee shop near school rather than at home. The conversation went well. The interviewer was impressed by my business experience and my clear sense of purpose. But the close call made me realize that I couldn't keep my dual application strategy hidden much longer. Acceptance letters started arriving in March. The first was from Northwestern, offering me admission to their pre-med program. My parents were ecstatic, celebrating with a special dinner and calling relatives to share the good news. I smiled and expressed appropriate gratitude while my stomach churned with anxiety about the inevitable confrontation that was coming. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Wharton. I intercepted the mail that day and opened it privately in my bedroom, my hands shaking as I unfolded the letter. "Congratulations," it began, and my heart soared. Not only had I been accepted, but I had been awarded a partial scholarship based on academic merit and demonstrated entrepreneurial potential. The Stanford letter arrived the following week with even better news. Full scholarship plus admission to their special program for promising young entrepreneurs. Reading that letter felt like validation of every risk I had taken, every small business I had started, every dream I had nurtured despite my parents' discouragement. But celebration was premature. I still had to tell my parents about the applications, the acceptances, and most importantly, my intention to choose business school over medicine. I spent weeks rehearsing different approaches, trying to find words that might help them understand why this path made sense for me. Nothing I practiced seemed adequate for the magnitude of the conversation ahead. The moment of truth came on a Tuesday evening in April. We had finished dinner and were sitting in the living room when I finally gathered the courage to speak. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something important about college." They looked up expectantly, probably assuming I was going to announce another acceptance or scholarship offer from one of the schools on their approved list. Instead, I took a deep breath and began the most difficult conversation of my young life. "I applied to some business schools in addition to the pre-med programs," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been accepted to several, including Stanford and Wharton. I want to study entrepreneurship and business, not medicine." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face went through a series of expressions from confusion to disbelief to anger. Mom just stared at me as if I had announced my intention to join the circus. "You did what?" Dad finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You applied to schools behind our backs, without discussing it with us." I tried to explain that I had been trying to find the right time to talk about it, that I knew they preferred other options but that I needed to explore what felt right for me. My words seemed to make things worse rather than better. "Business school," Mom said, her voice rising. "Sarah, we've talked about this. Business is not stable. It's not respectable. You're throwing away your potential to chase some fantasy about getting rich quick." "It's not about getting rich quick," I protested. "It's about building something meaningful, solving problems, creating value for people. I've been interested in this since I was a kid. You've seen how good I am at it." Dad stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "Those little projects you did were hobbies, Sarah. Child's play. Real business is cutthroat and unpredictable. People lose everything. Families get destroyed. I didn't work my entire life to give you security just so you could throw it away on pipe dreams." The conversation continued for hours, growing more heated as the evening progressed. They alternated between anger and pleading, between threats and promises. If I chose business school, they wouldn't pay for it. If I insisted on this foolish path, I would be on my own financially. They had sacrificed everything to give me opportunities, and this was how I repaid them. "Your dreams are stupid," Dad finally said, his face red with frustration and what I realized was fear. "You're 18 years old. You don't know anything about the real world. You think you're going to be the next Bill Gates, but you'll just end up broke and disappointed." Mom tried a gentler approach. "Sweetheart, we just want what's best for you. Medicine is secure. You'll always have work, always be able to support yourself and your family. These entrepreneurship fantasies might seem exciting now, but what happens when they don't work out? What happens when you fail? Their certainty that I would fail was perhaps the most painful part of the entire conversation. They weren't just opposing my choices, they were expressing fundamental disbelief in my abilities and judgment. Everything I had accomplished, every small success I had achieved, seemed invisible to them when weighed against their fears about my future. The argument resumed the next morning over breakfast and continued intermittently for weeks. My parents enlisted relatives, family friends, and even my guidance counselor in their campaign to change my mind. They presented statistics about business failure rates, stories about entrepreneurs who had lost everything, warnings about the instability and stress of non-traditional careers. "Look at your cousin Janet," Mom said during one particularly intense discussion. "She tried to start that catering business and lost her life savings. Now she's working retail at 43 years old. Is that what you want for yourself?" I tried to explain that Janet's experience didn't necessarily predict my own, that success in business required different skills and strategies, that the landscape was constantly evolving in ways that created new opportunities. But my arguments fell on deaf ears. They had made up their minds about the inherent dangers of entrepreneurship, and no amount of reasoning could shake their convictions. The stress of the ongoing conflict affected every aspect of our family life. Meals became tense affairs punctuated by pointed comments about responsibility and gratitude. My brother Michael was recruited to talk sense into me, though his heart didn't seem to be in the intervention. "I can see why business appeals to you," he admitted privately. "But they're not wrong about the risks. Maybe you could study business as a minor and keep medicine as your main focus." His suggestion was well-intentioned, but missed the fundamental issue. This wasn't about adding business knowledge to a medical career, it was about choosing to build a life around innovation and entrepreneurship instead of following a predetermined professional path. The two approaches were fundamentally incompatible worldviews, not different degree combinations. As the deadline for college decisions approached, the pressure became almost unbearable. My parents oscillated between disappointed silence and renewed attempts at persuasion. They brought home articles about successful doctors, invited physician friends over for dinner to talk about the rewards of medical practice, and repeatedly emphasized the financial security that a medical degree would provide. "We're not asking you to give up business entirely," Dad said during one late-night conversation. "Go to medical school, establish yourself as a doctor, and then maybe you can start a medical practice or invest in healthcare companies. You can have both security and business success." But his compromise missed the point entirely. I didn't want to approach business as a side project or hobby. I wanted to dive deep into understanding markets, developing products, building teams, and scaling operations. I wanted to spend my 20s learning from experienced entrepreneurs, not memorizing anatomical charts and preparing for medical boards. The deadline arrived with our conflict unresolved. I had to choose between the full scholarship to Stanford's business program and the pre-med track at Northwestern that my parents preferred. The decision felt impossible, like choosing between my dreams and my family. I spent the night before the deadline walking through our neighborhood, trying to imagine my life down each path. The medical route offered certainty, family approval, and financial security. It also felt like surrendering the core of who I was in exchange for external validation and safety. The business route offered uncertainty, family disappointment, and financial risk. But it also offered the possibility of building something meaningful, of testing my abilities against real challenges, of pursuing the work that had energized me since childhood. By morning I knew what I had to do. I found my parents in the kitchen, both looking exhausted from weeks of tension and argument. They looked up hopefully when I entered, perhaps thinking I had come to announce the sensible decision they had been pushing for. "I'm going to Stanford," I said quietly. "I'm going to study business and entrepreneurship." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight in the room. Mom's face crumpled, and she turned away to hide her tears. Dad's expression hardened into something I had never seen before. A combination of anger and disappointment so profound it seemed to transform him into a stranger. "If that's your choice," he said finally, his voice cold and controlled, "then you'll make it without our support. Financial or otherwise. Your dreams are stupid, and you'll come crawling back when reality hits you." Those words hung in the air like a curse. I nodded, understanding that I had just crossed a line from which there might be no return. I understand, I said, though my voice was barely above a whisper. Within an hour I had confirmed my acceptance to Stanford, and begun the process of arranging student loans to cover the costs that my scholarship didn't include. My parents watched this activity with stony silence, their disappointment palpable in every interaction. The remaining weeks before graduation passed in a kind of emotional stalemate. We lived in the same house, but barely spoke. Meals were quiet affairs where necessary communication was conducted through polite requests to pass dishes. My achievements at school, including being named valedictorian, were acknowledged with minimal enthusiasm. On graduation day, I delivered my valedictorian speech to a packed auditorium, speaking about the importance of following your convictions even when the path ahead is uncertain. I could see my parents in the audience, their faces carefully neutral. They attended the ceremony, but declined to join other families for the celebration afterward. That evening, as I packed my belongings for the move to California, the reality of my situation finally hit me. I was 18 years old, about to start college across the country with no family support, and limited financial resources. Everything I owned fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. The full weight of what I had chosen settled on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. But underneath the fear and uncertainty, there was something else: excitement. For the first time in my life, I was truly free to pursue my dreams without constantly justifying or defending them. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to choose. The morning I left for Stanford, my parents were cordially polite, the kind of distant courtesy they might show to a houseguest they didn't particularly like. Dad helped me load my suitcases into the taxi without making eye contact. Mom gave me a brief, stiff hug and reminded me to call when I arrived safely. As the taxi pulled away from the house on Maple Street, I watched my childhood home disappear through the rear window. I was leaving behind everything familiar and secure, armed with nothing but a partial scholarship, a mountain of student debt, and an unshakable belief that I was meant to build something important. I had no way of knowing that this departure would be the beginning of a journey that would ultimately prove my parents wrong in ways I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't foresee the companies I would start, the innovations I would develop, or the moment when I would stand on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange watching TechNova's stock price soar on our first day as a public company. All I knew as that taxi drove toward the airport was that I was finally free to find out what I was truly capable of achieving. The flight to San Francisco was my first time traveling alone, and every minute felt like crossing into an unknown universe. I pressed my face against the airplane window as we descended, watching the sprawling landscape of Silicon Valley spread beneath me like a circuit board of possibilities. The golden hills dotted with tech campuses seemed to shimmer with promise, though my bank account balance suggested a much grimmer reality. Stanford's campus overwhelmed me from the moment I stepped off the shuttle bus. Palm trees lined pristine walkways, where students lounged with laptops, their casual confidence suggesting they belonged in ways I couldn't imagine feeling. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going, while I clutched a crumpled campus map and tried to locate the dormitory that would be my home for the next 4 years. My roommate Jessica was everything I wasn't: wealthy, connected, and supremely comfortable in elite academic environments. Her side of our shared room looked like a luxury hotel suite, complete with a high-end computer setup, designer clothes organized in color-coordinated perfection, and framed photos of family vacations to exotic locations. She greeted me warmly, but with the slightly puzzled expression of someone trying to figure out how I had ended up in the same space as her. "Where are your parents?" she asked, as I unpacked my modest belongings. "Mine are taking me shopping for room decorations this afternoon. You should totally come with us." I invented an excuse about my parents having to leave immediately for work commitments, unwilling to admit that they hadn't come at all. The lie felt necessary but hollow, establishing a pattern of small deceptions that would help me navigate the social complexities of being a scholarship student among the children of tech executives and venture capitalists. Orientation week exposed the vast gulf between my background and that of my classmates. During icebreaker activities, students casually mentioned their parents' companies, their summer internships at major corporations, their gap-year adventures traveling through Europe or Asia. When asked about my background, I learned to emphasize my academic achievements while glossing over the financial struggles and family conflicts that had shaped my path to Stanford. The business school's introductory courses were simultaneously exhilarating and intimidating. Professors discussed case studies involving companies I had only read about online, analyzing strategic decisions made by executives who seemed to exist in a different stratosphere of success. My classmates contributed insights based on personal connections and family business experiences that I could only observe from the outside. Professor Martinez taught our foundational entrepreneurship course with an intensity that immediately captured my attention. He was a former startup founder who had built and sold 3 companies before returning to academia, and he approached business education with the urgency of someone who understood that theoretical knowledge meant nothing without practical application. Entrepreneurship isn't about having perfect ideas, he announced during our first class. It's about executing imperfect ideas better than anyone else. It's about solving real problems for real people and building sustainable value in the process. How many of you have actually started a business? About half the class raised their hands, most describing ventures funded by family money or connections. When he called on me, I shared the story of my web design business in high school, carefully omitting the part about my father forcing me to shut it down. Professor Martinez nodded approvingly, making notes that I hoped indicated interest rather than skepticism. After class, he approached me with a directness that caught me off guard. Miss Chen, I'd like you to consider joining my advanced entrepreneurship lab next semester. It's typically reserved for second-year students, but your application essay and your demonstrated experience suggest you might be ready for more challenging projects. The invitation felt like validation, but it also highlighted my financial constraints. The lab involved additional fees for materials and resources, plus the expectation that students would invest their own money in developing business concepts. I explained my situation as diplomatically as possible, mentioning scholarship requirements and budget limitations without dwelling on the specifics of my estrangement from my family. Professor Martinez listened thoughtfully before suggesting a work-study arrangement. I need a research assistant for my consulting projects, he offered. The pay would cover your lab fees, plus provide some additional income. You'd be working directly with startup clients, conducting market research and competitive analysis. Interested? I accepted immediately, grateful for the opportunity and the income it would provide. The position turned out to be far more educational than any traditional job could have been. I spent hours analyzing business models, interviewing potential customers, and researching market trends for companies ranging from biotech startups to social media platforms. Each project exposed me to different aspects of entrepreneurship while building practical skills that classroom lectures alone couldn't provide. My first semester grades reflected the intense focus I brought to my studies. I earned A's in all my business courses while struggling slightly with required classes outside my major. The academic success felt hollow though, because I had no one to share it with. Other students called home, excitedly to report their achievements, while I celebrated alone in my dorm room with takeout Chinese food and a borrowed textbook. The loneliness was more challenging than the academic workload. I made friends among my classmates, but most social activities required money I didn't have. Dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to San Francisco, spring break vacations in exotic locations, these experiences bonded my peers while highlighting my outsider status. I learned to decline invitations gracefully, citing study commitments or work obligations rather than admitting financial constraints. Winter break presented a particular challenge, since returning home wasn't an option. While other students flew back to family gatherings and holiday celebrations, I remained on the nearly empty campus, working extra hours for Professor Martinez and using the quiet time to develop my own business ideas. The isolation was profound, but it also provided uninterrupted time for deep thinking about my future goals. During those quiet December weeks, I began seriously developing a concept that had been percolating since my arrival at Stanford. I had noticed that many small businesses struggled with basic technology challenges, lacking the resources to hire professional IT support, but needing more sophisticated solutions than off-the-shelf software could provide. My web design experience had taught me that there was a significant gap between what small businesses needed and what they could afford. I spent winter break researching this market opportunity, conducting informal interviews with local business owners and analyzing competitors in the small business technology space. The more I investigated, the more convinced I became that there was room for a company that could provide customized technology solutions at prices small businesses could afford. My research revealed that existing companies in this space typically focused either on enterprise-level clients with large budgets or consumer-grade products that were too limited for serious business use. The middle market, consisting of small businesses with modest budgets but legitimate technology needs, was underserved by available options. I began sketching out a business model that could address this gap. The key would be developing standardized solutions that could be customized efficiently, allowing us to maintain affordable pricing while providing meaningful value. Instead of building everything from scratch for each client, we would create modular systems that could be configured to meet specific needs. The technical challenges were significant, but not insurmountable. The more complex question was how to bootstrap such a venture without family funding or extensive personal resources. I needed to find a way to start small, prove the concept, and grow gradually without requiring major upfront investment. Spring semester brought new opportunities and new pressures. Professor Martinez's Advanced Entrepreneurship Lab proved to be everything he had promised and more. Our cohort of 12 students worked on developing actual business ventures, with real accountability for market research, customer validation, and financial projections. Unlike typical academic exercises, these projects had genuine consequences and potential for implementation. My small business technology concept evolved significantly through the lab's rigorous analytical process. Fellow students challenged my assumptions, forced me to refine my value proposition, and helped me identify potential weaknesses in my business model. The collaborative environment pushed me to think more strategically about customer acquisition, competitive positioning, and scalability. One particularly valuable exercise involved presenting our concepts to a panel of actual venture capitalists and successful entrepreneurs. The feedback was brutally honest, but incredibly instructive. Several panelists questioned whether the small business market offered sufficient profit potential to justify the effort required. Others wondered if our target customers would actually pay for solutions when free alternatives existed. These criticisms stung initially, but they also forced me to strengthen my research and refine my approach. I conducted additional customer interviews, analyzed competitor pricing more thoroughly, and developed more sophisticated financial projections. The process was exhausting but educational in ways that traditional coursework couldn't match. My presentation to the final panel in April represented months of intensive work and represented the most professional business proposal I had ever developed. I walked them through market research, showing that small businesses spent billions of dollars annually on inadequate technology solutions. I demonstrated prototype software that could be customized quickly for different industries. I presented financial projections showing how we could achieve profitability within 18 months while maintaining affordable pricing for customers. The response exceeded my expectations. Two of the panelists expressed genuine interest in the concept, with one venture capitalist suggesting we should meet during the summer to discuss potential funding opportunities. Professor Martinez pulled me aside afterward to express his enthusiasm for both the business concept and my presentation. "Sarah, this is the kind of thinking that creates successful companies," he said. "You've identified a real market need, developed a viable solution, and presented it professionally. The question now is whether you're serious about pursuing it beyond the academic setting." His question forced me to confront the gap between academic exercises and real-world implementation. Developing a business concept in the safety of a university lab was entirely different from risking actual money and reputation on its success. The venture capitalist's interest was encouraging, but it also made the possibility of failure feel more concrete and more frightening. Summer provided an unexpected opportunity to test my resolve. Professor Martinez arranged for me to intern with one of his consulting clients, a mid-sized technology company that was struggling to scale their operations effectively. The position paid well enough to cover my living expenses while providing invaluable exposure to the challenges facing growing businesses. The company Data Flow Solutions had developed excellent products but lacked the operational sophistication needed to serve larger clients effectively. Their technology was solid, but their customer service processes were chaotic, their sales approach was inconsistent, and their internal communication systems were barely functional. I was hired ostensibly to conduct market research, but my role expanded quickly to include operational analysis and process improvement recommendations. Working at Dataflow taught me more about business realities than any classroom possibly could. I observed firsthand how brilliant technical innovations could fail due to poor execution, inadequate marketing, or simply bad timing. I watched talented employees become frustrated by inefficient systems and unclear expectations. I saw how small operational problems could cascade into major customer relations disasters. Most importantly, I learned that successful businesses required far more than good ideas or even good products. They required effective systems, competent management, consistent execution, and relentless attention to customer needs. The romantic vision of entrepreneurship I had harbored was replaced by a more realistic understanding of the hard work and detailed focus required to build something sustainable. My supervisor at Dataflow, Director of Operations Amanda Foster, became an unexpected mentor during that summer. She had joined the company as employee number 15 and had grown with the organization as it scaled from startup to mid-size business. Her perspective on the challenges of rapid growth proved invaluable for understanding what my own venture might face if it succeeded. The hardest part isn't coming up with ideas, Amanda explained during one of our regular check-in meetings. It's executing consistently when you're tired, stressed, dealing with difficult customers, and wondering if you're making the right decisions. It's maintaining quality standards when you're growing fast and hiring quickly. It's staying focused on what matters when everyone has opinions about what you should be doing differently. Her insights influenced how I thought about my own business concept. Instead of focusing primarily on the technology aspects, I began developing detailed operational plans for customer service, quality control, employee training, and financial management. I realized that success would depend as much on these behind-the-scenes systems as on the innovative solutions we would provide to clients. The summer internship also provided networking opportunities that would prove crucial later. I met other young professionals who shared my entrepreneurial ambitions, several of whom expressed interest in potentially joining a startup venture. I attended industry conferences and meetup events where I learned about funding sources, partnership opportunities, and common pitfalls facing new businesses. One particularly significant connection was Marcus Williams, a software engineer at a major tech company who was becoming increasingly frustrated with corporate bureaucracy and interested in startup opportunities. We met at a networking event for young professionals in tech, and our conversation immediately revealed shared values and complementary skills. Marcus had the technical expertise I lacked for developing sophisticated software solutions, while I brought business development and customer relations experience that he found appealing. We began meeting regularly to discuss potential collaboration, eventually developing the foundation for what would become a crucial partnership. By the end of summer, I had refined my business concept significantly and assembled the beginnings of a team capable of implementing it. Marcus agreed to join as technical co-founder, bringing both coding skills and connections within the developer community. Amanda Foster expressed interest in serving as an advisor, providing operational guidance as we grew. Professor Martinez offered to help with introductions to potential investors and strategic partners. Returning to Stanford for my sophomore year felt different than my first arrival had a year earlier. I was no longer the uncertain small-town girl overwhelmed by an unfamiliar environment. I had proven myself academically, developed professional relationships, and created a viable business plan that serious people took seriously. The confidence was intoxicating, but it was tempered by awareness of how much I still needed to learn. Fall semester courses provided opportunities to test my business concept against new frameworks and analytical tools. Advanced marketing classes helped me refine my customer acquisition strategies. Finance courses provided deeper understanding of fundraising options and financial management requirements. Strategy courses challenged me to think more systematically about competitive positioning and long-term planning. I also used campus resources to conduct additional market research and prototype development. The engineering school's fabrication lab allowed me to create mock-ups of hardware components we would need. The business school's database access provided detailed industry analysis and competitor intelligence. The career services office connected me with alumni working at relevant companies who could provide market insights and potential partnership opportunities. The most significant development came in November when the venture capitalist from my spring presentation reached out to schedule a formal meeting. Patricia Hawkins from Sequoia Capital had been tracking my progress through Professor Martinez and was interested in discussing potential investment in what was now called TechBridge Solutions. Preparing for that meeting required synthesizing everything I had learned over the past 18 months into a comprehensive business plan and presentation. I worked with Marcus to develop technical demonstrations of our prototype software. We created detailed financial projections showing multiple growth scenarios. We researched Sequoia's investment criteria and portfolio companies to understand what they would be looking for in a potential investment. The meeting itself was both exhilarating and terrifying. Patricia Hawkins was exactly what I had expected from a top-tier venture capitalist, sharp, direct, and completely focused on the business fundamentals that would determine success or failure. She asked probing questions about our target market, competitive advantages, scalability plans, and team qualifications. "You've identified an interesting market opportunity," she acknowledged after reviewing our presentation. "The question is whether you and your team have the experience and resources needed to execute effectively in a competitive market. Building a successful technology company requires more than good ideas and technical skills." Her concerns were valid and forced me to acknowledge gaps in our preparation. While Marcus and I brought enthusiasm and relevant skills, neither of us had experience managing a growing company, raising significant funding, or competing against established players in a competitive market. We needed additional team members with complementary experience and proven track records. Patricia suggested we spend the next 6 months strengthening our team and refining our business model before seeking formal investment. She offered to introduce us to potential advisors and suggested specific areas where additional expertise would be valuable. While not the immediate funding commitment I had hoped for, her guidance provided a clear roadmap for moving forward. The rest of my sophomore year focused on implementing Patricia's recommendations while maintaining my academic performance. I recruited additional team members, including a marketing professional with small business experience and an operations manager who had worked at several successful startups. We refined our prototype software based on customer feedback and competitive analysis. We developed more sophisticated financial projections and operational plans. Most importantly, we began testing our concept with actual customers. Instead of waiting for perfect solutions, we started offering our services to a small number of local businesses, using their feedback to improve our processes and validate our business model. The early clients were patient with our learning curve, but they also provided honest assessments of what we were doing well and where we needed improvement. The customer feedback confirmed that we had identified a real market need, but it also revealed complexities we hadn't fully anticipated. Different industries required different customization approaches. Customer onboarding took longer than expected. Technical support demands were higher than we had projected. Each challenge provided learning opportunities, but they also highlighted how much we still needed to develop. By spring of my sophomore year, TechBridge Solutions had evolved from an academic exercise into a legitimate business venture serving real customers and generating modest revenue. We weren't profitable yet, but we had proven that our concept could work and that customers were willing to pay for our services. The foundation was in place for more ambitious growth, but that would require resources and decisions that would fundamentally change my college experience. The choice I faced at the end of sophomore year felt similar to the decision I had made about college 2 years earlier. I could continue developing TechBridge as a part-time venture while completing my degree, or I could commit fully to the business and leave Stanford to focus on building the company. Both options carried significant risks and potential rewards. Professor Martinez advocated for completing my degree before pursuing the business full-time. "You have the rest of your life to be an entrepreneur," he argued. "But you only have one chance to complete your Stanford education. The knowledge and connections you gain here will serve you throughout your career." Marcus and our other team members were ready to commit full-time to TechBridge, arguing that our window of opportunity might not remain open if we didn't move aggressively. "We have momentum now," Marcus insisted. "Customer demand is growing, our solutions are improving, and we have potential investors interested. If we wait 2 more years, competitors might capture the market we're trying to build." The decision felt impossible because both arguments had merit. Stanford was providing invaluable education and networking opportunities that would benefit me throughout my career. But TechBridge represented the culmination of everything I had been working toward since childhood, the chance to prove that my entrepreneurial instincts could create something meaningful and valuable. The choice became clearer when Patricia Hawkins called in April with news that would change everything. Sequoia was prepared to offer TechBridge a Series A funding round of $2 million contingent on our team's full-time commitment to growing the business. The investment would provide resources to hire additional employees, expand our service offerings, and scale our operations to serve customers nationwide. This is the opportunity you've been preparing for, Patricia explained during our call. But venture capital only works if the founding team is completely committed to building a successful company. We can't invest in a part-time venture run by college students with divided attention. Her ultimatum forced the decision I had been avoiding. I could complete my Stanford degree and always wonder what might have been, or I could seize this opportunity and risk everything on my ability to build a successful company. The choice felt like the most important moment of my life to that point, carrying implications that would echo for decades regardless of which path I chose. I spent a week agonizing over the decision, calling everyone whose opinion I valued and weighing every possible consideration. Professor Martinez remained skeptical about leaving school early. My Stanford classmates were divided, with some envying the opportunity while others questioning the wisdom of abandoning a sure thing for an uncertain venture. Marcus and the TechBridge team were unanimously in favor of accepting the investment and committing fully to the business. The person whose opinion I most wanted was the one I couldn't ask. Throughout this entire journey, I had wondered what my father would think about the path I was taking. Would he be proud of my achievements, or would he see them as confirmation of his warnings about the instability of entrepreneurial ventures? I had proven that business school wasn't the frivolous waste of time he had predicted, but I still hadn't proven that I could build something lasting and valuable. In the end, the decision felt inevitable. Everything I had done since leaving home had been building toward this moment. The friendship bracelets, the websites for local businesses, the late nights studying business cases, the customer interviews and prototype development, all of it had been preparation for the opportunity that now presented itself. On a Tuesday morning in late April, I walked into Patricia Hawkins' office and accepted Sequoia's investment offer. I agreed to leave Stanford immediately to focus full-time on building TechBridge solutions into the company we had envisioned. It was the second time in my life that I had chosen my entrepreneurial dreams over the safe path others recommended, and once again, I was betting everything on my ability to prove the skeptics wrong. Leaving Stanford felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was solid ground below. The $2 million from Sequoia gave us runway, but it also created enormous pressure to deliver results quickly. Patricia Hawkins made it clear during our first board meeting that venture capital came with expectations and timelines that would test everything I thought I knew about running a business. We established TechBridge's headquarters in a converted warehouse space in Palo Alto, sharing the building with 3 other startups. The open floor plan buzzed with energy from 20-something entrepreneurs convinced they were changing the world. Our corner section included workstations for 12 employees, a conference room with whiteboards covering every wall, and a kitchen area that became the unofficial center of company culture. Hiring our first employees proved more challenging than I had anticipated. My age worked against me in many interviews, with experienced candidates questioning whether a college dropout could lead a serious technology company. The few who joined us initially did so because they believed in our mission rather than our management experience. Each new hire felt like both a victory and a test of whether we could attract the talent needed to compete effectively. Marcus threw himself into building our core technology platform with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He spent 16-hour days coding new features, debugging customer issues, and architecting systems that could scale as our client base grew. His technical brilliance impressed everyone who worked with him, but his reluctance to delegate created bottlenecks that slowed our development process. My role evolved daily as we discovered what running a real company actually required. Customer acquisition, employee management, financial planning, vendor negotiations, investor relations, each area demanded skills I was learning in real time. The business school frameworks I had studied provided useful context, but nothing had prepared me for the relentless pressure of making decisions that affected other people's livelihoods and our company's survival. Our first major crisis came 6 months after accepting Sequoia's investment. A security vulnerability in our core software exposed customer data for several small businesses, creating liability issues that threatened both our reputation and our legal standing. The technical fix required 3 weeks of intensive development work, during which we couldn't onboard new clients or deploy updates for existing customers. The incident taught me harsh lessons about crisis management and customer communication. Some clients canceled their contracts immediately, citing concerns about our security practices. Others remained loyal but demanded detailed explanations and assurances about future protections. The local business press covered the story with skepticism about whether a young startup had the experience needed to handle sensitive business data. I spent those 3 weeks visiting affected customers personally, explaining our response plan and demonstrating the enhanced security measures we were implementing. The face-to-face conversations were uncomfortable but crucial for maintaining relationships that could have been lost to email explanations or phone calls. Several clients later told me that my willingness to take personal responsibility during the crisis convinced them to give us another chance. The security incident also revealed gaps in our internal processes that needed immediate attention. We hired a chief technology officer with enterprise security experience, implemented rigorous testing procedures, and established incident response protocols that would prevent similar problems in the future.
The improvements cost time and money we couldn't easily spare, but they made TechBridge a stronger company. By our first anniversary, we had grown to 28 employees serving over 200 small business clients across 12 states. Revenue was growing steadily, customer satisfaction scores were improving, and our technology platform was becoming increasingly sophisticated. The metrics suggested we were building something sustainable, but the daily reality felt chaotic and overwhelming. Patricia Hawkins pushed us to think bigger during our quarterly board meetings. "You've proven the concept works at small scale," she observed during our 1-year review. "The question now is whether you can build something that scales to thousands of clients and generates returns worthy of venture investment. That requires different strategies and different capabilities than what got you this far." Her feedback led to our most significant strategic pivot. Instead of continuing to serve individual small businesses one at a time, we decided to partner with industry associations and franchise systems that could distribute our services to hundreds of members simultaneously. The approach required redesigning our technology platform and sales process, but it offered potential for much faster growth. The franchise partnership strategy proved transformative for our business model. Restaurant chains, retail franchises, and service businesses all struggled with the same technology challenges we had been solving individually. By working with their corporate headquarters, we could standardize solutions that would work across multiple locations while maintaining the customization that made our services valuable. Our first major partnership was with a regional restaurant chain that operated 47 locations across 3 states. Implementing our technology systems for their entire network required 6 months of intensive collaboration, but it generated more revenue than we had earned from individual clients in the previous year. More importantly, it demonstrated that our solutions could work at scale. Success with the restaurant chain opened doors to similar partnerships with other franchise systems. A automotive service chain signed up for 62 locations. A retail clothing company wanted our services for 38 stores. Each partnership required customization work, but the standardized components made implementation faster and more profitable than our original approach. The rapid growth created new challenges that tested our organizational capabilities. We needed to hire technical support staff who could handle customer issues for hundreds of locations simultaneously. Our development team had to build features that worked across different industries while maintaining the simplicity that made our products appealing. Our sales process had to evolve from individual relationships to enterprise negotiations with sophisticated procurement departments. Most significantly, I had to learn how to manage a company that was growing faster than my experience suggested was possible. We went from 30 employees to 85 in 8 months, with new hires joining faster than we could train them effectively.
Company culture, which had developed organically in our early days, required intentional cultivation to maintain as we scaled. I sought advice from other entrepreneurs who had navigated similar growth phases, learning from their successes and mistakes. The consistent message was that rapid scaling required different leadership skills than startup survival. Instead of being involved in every decision, I needed to delegate responsibility while maintaining strategic oversight. Instead of personally managing every customer relationship, I needed to build systems that could deliver consistent service quality without my direct involvement. The transition from hands-on founder to strategic leader was more difficult than I had expected. My instinct was to stay involved in operational details, but the company's growth made that approach counterproductive. I hired experienced managers for customer success, business development, and operations, then struggled to give them the autonomy they needed to do their jobs effectively. Our second funding round came 18 months after Sequoia's initial investment. The company's growth trajectory and market opportunity attracted interest from multiple venture capital firms, creating a competitive process that resulted in better terms than we had dared hope for. The $15 million Series B round valued TechBridge at $60 million, a number that seemed surreal given our humble beginnings. The new funding enabled us to accelerate hiring, expand our technology development, and pursue larger partnership opportunities. We opened a second office in Austin to tap into that city's growing tech talent pool. We hired sales representatives in major metropolitan areas to build relationships with franchise headquarters and industry associations. We invested in marketing campaigns that positioned TechBridge as a leader in the small business technology space. The increased visibility brought both opportunities and scrutiny. Industry publications featured articles about our rapid growth and innovative approach to serving underserved markets. Competitors began developing similar offerings, forcing us to innovate constantly to maintain our competitive advantages. Potential customers had higher expectations and more alternatives than they had when we were a scrappy startup. 3 years after leaving Stanford, I found myself managing a company with over 150 employees, serving more than 1,500 business locations, and generating annual revenue approaching $20 million. The numbers represented success by any reasonable measure, but they also created pressure to continue growing at rates that would justify our investors' expectations. The conversation about going public began during our 4th year of operation. Investment bankers started reaching out with analyses of market conditions and comparisons to other technology companies that had recently completed initial public offerings. Patricia Hawkins suggested we begin preparing for an IPO, arguing that public markets would provide capital for even more aggressive expansion. The IPO preparation process consumed nearly a year of intense focus on financial systems, regulatory compliance, and market positioning. We hired a chief financial officer with public company experience, implemented enterprise-grade accounting systems, and established governance procedures that would satisfy securities regulators. Every aspect of our business had to be documented, analyzed, and presented to potential investors. The roadshow for our initial public offering took us to major financial centers across the country and internationally. I found myself presenting TechBridge's story to institutional investors, pension funds, and mutual fund managers, who controlled billions of dollars in investment capital. The presentations required distilling our complex business model into compelling narratives that demonstrated both our achievements and our potential for future growth. The questions from potential investors were more sophisticated than anything I had encountered in venture capital fundraising. They wanted to understand our competitive moats, market expansion opportunities, and strategies for maintaining growth rates as we scaled. They analyzed our customer acquisition costs, lifetime value calculations, and operational efficiency metrics, with scrutiny that revealed weaknesses we hadn't previously recognized. Some investor meetings went exceptionally well, with fund managers expressing enthusiasm for our market position and growth trajectory. Others were more challenging, with skeptical questions about our ability to compete against larger technology companies that might enter our market. Each presentation taught me something new about how institutional investors evaluated growth companies. The day of our IPO arrived with a mixture of excitement and terror that reminded me of leaving home for Stanford 7 years earlier. We priced our shares at $28 each, raising over $200 million that would fund our expansion plans. The valuation implied that TechBridge was worth $2.8 billion, a number that seemed disconnected from reality until I remembered all the late nights, difficult decisions, and calculated risks that had made it possible. Standing on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange as our stock began trading felt like the culmination of everything I had been working towards since childhood. The opening bell ceremony was attended by our employees, investors, and board members who had supported our journey. As our stock price climbed throughout the first day of trading, I thought about all the people who had believed in our vision when it existed only on whiteboards and in PowerPoint presentations. The market's reaction exceeded our expectations. TechBridge's shares closed at $41 on the first day, up nearly 50% from our offering price. The trading volume indicated strong institutional interest, and analyst reports praised our market position and growth potential. Financial news outlets featured stories about our success, often emphasizing my age and unconventional background. But the moment that meant the most came 3 days after our IPO, when I received an unexpected phone call from my brother Michael. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years, and his voice carried emotions I had rarely heard from him before. "Sarah, I've been following your company's progress," he said quietly. "I wanted to call and tell you how proud I am of what you've built. I know Dad and Mom couldn't see it, but you were right about your path. You were right about everything." His words hit me harder than any analyst report or stock price movement could have. For the first time since leaving home, I felt validation from my family, even if it came from only one member. Michael went on to explain that he had been questioning his own career choices, wondering if he had been too quick to accept the safe path our parents had prescribed. "Watching your success made me realize that security isn't the only thing that matters," he continued. "You took huge risks, but you also created something valuable that helps thousands of people. That's more meaningful than just collecting a steady paycheck." We talked for over an hour, covering years of missed conversations and unspoken regrets. Michael shared his own entrepreneurial ideas, asking for advice about potentially leaving his engineering job to start a company. I encouraged him to pursue his interests, while learning from my experiences about the challenges and rewards of building something from scratch. The conversation with Michael prompted me to reflect on how much had changed since I made the decision to pursue business school against my parents' wishes. The scared 18-year-old who had left home with 2 suitcases and a mountain of student debt had become the CEO of a publicly traded company that employed over 300 people and served thousands of small businesses. But the most important changes weren't visible in financial statements or press coverage. I had learned to trust my instincts while remaining open to feedback and advice. I had developed the confidence to make difficult decisions under pressure while acknowledging when I needed help from others. I had built meaningful relationships with employees, customers, and partners who shared our mission of helping small businesses succeed. The success also brought perspective on my parents' reaction to my career choices. Their fears about entrepreneurship weren't entirely unfounded. Business ventures do fail regularly, and the path I had chosen involved risks that could have resulted in very different outcomes. Their desire for my security and stability came from love, even if their expression of those concerns had been hurtful and limiting. I never received acknowledgement from my father before he passed away from a heart attack during TechBridge's 5th year of operation. Michael called to tell me about the funeral, which I attended despite our years of estrangement. Standing at his graveside, I felt sadness for the relationship we had never been able to repair, but also gratitude for the way his skepticism had strengthened my determination to prove myself. My mother attended the funeral but maintained the distance that had characterized our relationship since I left for Stanford. We exchanged polite condolences and brief updates about our lives, but the fundamental disconnect remained. She seemed genuinely surprised by my business success, but still unable to understand why I had chosen such an uncertain path to achieve it. The years following our IPO brought both new opportunities and new challenges. TechBridge expanded internationally, opening offices in London and Toronto to serve small businesses in those markets. We acquired 2 smaller companies that provided complementary services, integrating their technologies and teams into our growing platform. We launched new product lines that addressed additional needs our customers had identified. The scale of our operations sometimes amazed me. We processed millions of transactions monthly for tens of thousands of business locations. Our technology systems handled customer data for industries ranging from restaurants to retail to professional services. Our employee count approached 800 people working across multiple countries and time zones. Leading a public company required different skills than building a startup had demanded. Quarterly earnings calls with analysts, regulatory filings with securities commissions, board meetings with independent directors, each responsibility required preparation and expertise that I was still developing. I hired experienced executives to manage areas outside my core competencies while maintaining strategic oversight of our overall direction. The public market's attention brought both validation and pressure. When our quarterly results exceeded expectations, our stock price would surge and financial media would praise our execution. When growth slowed or expenses increased, analysts would question our strategy and investors would demand explanations. The constant scrutiny required thick skin and long-term perspective. But the most rewarding aspect of our success remained the impact we had on our customers. Small business owners regularly sent messages thanking us for solutions that had helped them serve their customers better, reduce their costs, or expand their operations. The technology we had developed was enabling entrepreneurs to focus on what they did best, rather than struggling with systems they didn't understand. 10 years after leaving Stanford to build TechBridge, I stood before an audience of 500 entrepreneurs at a conference for small business owners. My keynote speech focused on the importance of believing in your vision even when others can't see it, of persisting through setbacks and criticism, and of building something that creates value for others rather than just pursuing personal success. As I looked out at the audience, I saw faces that reminded me of my younger self, entrepreneurs who were betting everything on ideas that others might consider impractical or unrealistic. Some would succeed spectacularly, others would fail and try again, but all of them were choosing to pursue their vision rather than accepting limitations others had tried to impose. The speech concluded with advice I wished someone had given me when I was 18 years old and afraid to disappoint my parents. Your dreams aren't stupid just because other people can't understand them. The world needs people who are willing to take risks, solve problems, and build things that didn't exist before. Trust your instincts, learn from your mistakes, and never let anyone convince you that playing it safe is more valuable than pursuing your potential. The standing ovation that followed felt like completion of a journey that had begun with friendship bracelets in elementary school, and led through years of doubt, struggle, and eventual triumph. I had proven to myself, if not to my father, that dreams backed by determination and hard work could become reality. TechBridge continued growing, eventually becoming one of the leading technology platforms for small businesses worldwide. Our IPO had been just the beginning of a story that would continue evolving as we found new ways to serve our customers and expand our impact. The scared young woman who had left home with nothing but hope and determination had built something that would outlast her involvement and continue helping entrepreneurs long into the future. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.